and I'm excited to share a little bit of your story and your wisdom. I'd like to give a little bit of your background. So tell us just a bit, where you grew up, kind of your educational journey, what you studied, and sort of where you've landed in your career.
Yeah, well, we'll try and make that short, right? Because I've been a lot of places, and sometimes I have people ask me if I'm running from something or chasing it, and I say definitely don't think I'm running from anything, but definitely chasing. I grew up in Northwest Indiana and grew up in a little community by the name of Wanata. And if you don't know what Wanata is, it's an Indian name that stands for knee deep in mud. And, I don't know that I ever felt like I was knee-deep in mud, but I definitely was in a small town where everybody knew everybody, and that was a good thing for me. I really enjoy people, and was fortunate to come through my small high school, and I was one of 3 out of our class of about 45 that decided to go on to college, and ended up at Manchester. For those of you listening to the Grace podcast, it wasn't Grace, but ended up at Manchester, thought I was going to study computer science, and ended up, after one class, realizing that really wasn't everything I thought it was going to be, and ended up in an accounting finance path instead. Met my wife there, Debbie, and was really, really blessed to get my education, find a bride, and then eventually launch into a career into public accounting. It was my start, and we've been in a lot of different places. I would say the accounting and finance discipline that I studied was certainly what got me the start, but just my curiousness of business is also what's really led us in a lot of different paths. And again, I would just say that I'm fortunate to get to the point where I left the community that I was a part of. Not suggesting it would have been a bad thing if I had ended up there for a lifetime, but it really allowed me to just go see the world. And we've been fortunate. I've moved 14 times. Debbie's moved 13 times. Yeah, we've gone as far as Scotland, as you may remember, and we've also kind of blanketed the Midwest with some jobs in Michigan, Chicago, as well as Minnesota. I've mostly been in orthopedics and medical devices throughout my career in finance capacities, but also have done some automotive supply work. I've done foundry work. Was at a landscape tool business here locally, and also spent a couple short years out in Manhattan, New York with Steinway musical instruments.
You've really done it all. That's for sure. One of the things I think is fascinating about you is I'm not sure people would guess accounting finance meeting you because you're a people person. I mean, you are an extrovert and you love investing in people. Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested to know just how has that worked in your career? This hard skill of finance, accounting, business mind, but really you are first and foremost, at least from my perception, a people person.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right on, and I want to just give credit where credit's due. My parents were very influential in who I am and what I'm all about. Certainly, God made me, but my father was the real influence. And my father, again, in this small town, didn't know a stranger. Everyone knew him, and he knew everyone. And I've really just tried to emulate that in a lot of ways throughout my business career. It served me well. My father was. He was a remarkable man, and my dad's been gone for a little over 30 years. We lost him at a very early age to esophageal carcinoma, but my dad would find just I would say the lowliest of lowly jobs that people were doing, and if they were doing a good job, he would make sure that he went out of his way to tell them that. And as a result, he would just strike up relationships and conversations that were just phenomenal to me. And I don't know that when I was a kid I appreciated it as much as I do now looking back and trying to emulate him. And in some small way, I think it was a resemblance. You think about the way that Jesus, went around and met people. There's a lot of similarity. My father was not a deeply churched man. He had a relationship with the Lord, and I know he sits at the side of him, But I just think about how my dad, again, would tell stories. He'd connect with people, and again, that's what fuels me. I love accounting. I think if you cut me deep enough, I'm a numbers guy through and through, and that's where I probably resort to in my weakest moments is to what do the numbers say? But again, I do love people, and I think relationships matter in so many ways. I think that if you're trying to do anything, whether it be business, personal, spiritual, I think that relationships are where it all roots to.
I wanna dig in on that a little bit because that's kind of how we get to Grace College, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is relationships. So, tell us a little bit about kind of your first entrees into learning about Grace, getting connected to Grace, even prior to being a board member. And I know we're going back a few years here, but what happened? How did that happen?
Yeah.
How did you get connected here?
It's interesting. Again, I'll try and make it fairly succinct, but I remember when we moved into this community, Grace, I knew where Grace was, and to be quite frank and honest, Grace was kind of portrayed as it's its own place. You'd come to the four-way stop there in Winona, and you just kind of knew that that's where you were supposed to stop. But somebody that I think really helped to change all that was Dr. Manahan. And I had the good fortune of meeting Dr. Manahan relatively early in my career. He's such a phenomenal guy, and what I remember us giving Dr. Manahan a hard time about is he knew he had this orthopedic capital right here in his backyard of Grace College, and a great place to deploy students or engage students, in their academic journeys. And we joked because he was always trying to herd the cats, is what we called them, and make relationships inside these orthopedic companies that competed with one another, on a day in and day out basis. But we all lived here in this same community, and so I really believe that he was instrumental in opening the doors or opening the roadways, if you will, to be a part of Grace College. And so, Dr. Manahan asked me at one point, I guess the first step was to become part of the Orthopedic Scholar program and help develop the curriculum around that. And I was happy.
That was in the business school mainly, right? So it was kind of students who were interested in orthopedics getting sort of prepped and ready as an undergrad to enter.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And again, it was a natural, right? You have the businesses right here that they could feed into and be a part of. And again, to Dr. Manahan's credit, they saw the opportunity associated with that. So I helped develop that curriculum, and eventually that led to an opportunity to be invited onto the board. And I remember pretty distinctly, I share this all the time, that the day he asked me was the day after I had decided that we were going to move our family to Scotland. And so I wanted to be full disclosure, and I said, "Well, I'd need for you to know that I'm really, just deeply humbled for the ask, but we're going to be moving abroad," and thinking that would deter him. And without any hesitation, to his credit, he immediately said, "Well, we're looking for global representation as well." And so the match was made, and that set me on a journey of 15 years that I spent on the board. And I remember those early years. The board was comprised of a lot of pastors, a very different makeup than maybe what exists today. We still have pastors on the board, but it's not in the same percentage relationship. You know that as well as anybody. But it exposed me in a different way to how different folks think, but just the learnings that I had early on. It reminds me of a lot of times you hear people say that they're going to go on a mission trip because they're going to give something, and they end up getting more than they gave. And I really would say that in a lot of ways, while 15 years on the board was a long time, I really feel like I probably got as much, if not more, than I ever gave in that capacity.
I want to talk, about your board service and some of what you both gained and some of what you gave as well, some of the highlights from that. But I'd also be interested just to talk about in your own, professional journey, what does it look like? And because I know you've done this with many students and alumni to connect with them and sort of why and how. Because I think you have this unique gift of finding maybe diamonds in the rough, if you want to call it that, or just those you see with potential and seeking them out for relationship and then elevating them. And I want to hear from you, like, why, and then how do you go about that? If somebody else wanted to emulate that, what would that look like? And then if you have a story or two of someone that is grace related, I'd love to hear that as well. I'd like to dig into that part of what you do.
Well, first of all, thanks for the kind words. It's always humbling to hear people talk about you in positive ways. I consider what I do, like I say, just trying to live out, what my earthly father and my heavenly Father would expect of me. But it's something that drives me. It's something that fuels me to make a connection with somebody. And there are a lot of words I think that you could use to describe it, but I think the word that I've become more acclimated with is empathy. And I work for Ambassador today, and before I joined Ambassador, I think I used to believe that empathy and sympathy might have been the synonyms, and they're very different. And I won't go into a great Webster dictionary definitional difference, but I think showing empathy is the way that I connect with folks, and that is to really try and lean in to the conversation, to listen with all my intent of understanding what it is that they're going through or what it is that their life may entail. And God's blessed me with a lot of different experiences myself. So being able to try and put myself in that situation, or maybe know of a situation that's similar to theirs, and then to figure out if there's something that I might have to offer to the relationship that can help them. And again, it's so interesting when you think you're helping someone when it comes bouncing right back to you, and in spades and maybe more, and that they help you even further. And so that drives me. I would say, coming from a small community, it's probably also in my mind and ingrained that there were a lot of folks that I grew up around that they were far more likely to be successful and talented than I have been blessed to go on and do some things with. But I think I had people that invested in me that helped me achieve what I've been able to achieve. And so it's a way of trying to pay it forward sometimes. I think that's also something that is on my mind. And then I would also say that, I had the really good fortune back at Manchester, my alma mater, to have the opportunity to room with a black man. And it was my first real exposure to a minority situation, and my eyes were opened immensely as to what his life entailed, being a minority on the campus of Manchester at that time, but more importantly, even in the community that we were a part of, and to walk alongside of Rodney, the way that I got the chance to do. And to see some of the things that I recall, the words profiling come to my mind of the way that he lived his life sometimes, it just changed me forever to think about when I go into a room, is there somebody that I see that potentially maybe doesn't look like they belong or fit. And it's not because their skin color doesn't make them belong. It's just everybody else in the room is a different skin color, or everybody else is a different gender or ethnicity. And so trying to make them feel part of what's going on. And it's, it's the word inclusion that we all talk about these days. So that's a long way around the barn, Drew. I'll finish by saying that, my education at Manchester was outstanding, but my education throughout my career has just opened and exposed me to so many things, and it's given me an opportunity to be around a lot of really talented people. If I can encourage anybody to do anything, it's, put yourself out there. But also I would encourage you to really think about what it is the other person might be experiencing, and try and put yourself in those shoes. And again, have empathy for that individual. I think it'll make the world a different place, clearly, if we all thought about it in that fashion.
Yeah. Can you think of a story of a student or a young professional who graduated from Grace that you've had the opportunity to kind of invest in, and then sort of seen them go on to, and I know there's a lot of them, so I'm making you pick one.
Yeah, that's what makes me anxious, to be honest. I can think of, so many, and I think rather than, pick one and have somebody say, well, why didn't he pick me? I'm just going to say that what's been, I think, the same in each of the instances is I've always felt that the table stakes were covered when it came to hiring or finding people at Grace. And what I mean by that is honesty and integrity and really strongly valued. I just knew that was the table stakes of entry. And that's not to say that every student that arrives at Grace immediately has all of those things when they arrive here. But I'm pretty darn confident that by the time that they depart here, those are all just naturally ingrained. And so it's made it easier for me to be able to know that when I select a candidate to come work and be a part of our team, that I'm going to have somebody with high integrity and high values, and also going to be passionate to serve. And I think that that's something as well. I would just say, if you're a listener out there, and I'm not trying to push my faith as much as I am just trying to suggest to people, we're here for such a short period of time. I've heard people describe it as it's a mere dot in comparison to the line being eternity. But are you doing everything that you can do during this time or this dot that you're on this earth to make a difference? And are you making a difference in people's lives, making a difference in the kingdom that we're a part of? And that's where I go back again full circle and say, the Grace students that I've hired over the years, they haven't had all the answers when they come to an organization, but I've watched them lean in and engage. And then I've just seen so many success stories that come. And again, I'm not going to name names, but we have some incredible stories with our Grace alum, and I'm fortunate to be associated with a lot of those folks. Either know them or in some cases been fortunate enough to work alongside and come alongside those folks.
One of the other things I think in this conversation about connecting with people that you have taught me, and I'm interested just to hear for you how it happens, and that is, the random call from Bob, which happens, and it's kind of like, it could be 9 a.m, could be 8 o'clock at night. Bob's calling, and I pick up the phone. There's no agenda. There's no. I'm just calling, checking in. How's it? Do you have like a? Is that just as the Spirit leads? Do you have a methodology? Because I've picked up on that as something I've wanted to emulate, and just randomly call people for no reason except for I'm checking in.
Yeah, well, first of all, be reminded I'm an extrovert off the charts. And so as much as you might feel like it's really good for you, it also puts fuel in my tank. So that's a little of the selfish side of me. But in all seriousness, there really isn't generally a method to my madness. I would say in the last 3.5, 4 years since having been with the Ambassador organization, and even the time that I spent on the board at Grace, I think that I try to be a lot more cognizant of when God is sending a signal to me. And that's easier today with text because you see something or contact lists, and I would tell you my daughter has given me a hard time for a number of years and say, Dad, would you clean up your contact list? My gosh, there's thousands of names in here. How can you keep all this? And I challenge her each and every time to just pick a name. Just pick a name and tell me who it is and let me tell you a story about that person. And I think that's what a lot of times will prompt me is, I'll see a situation or I'll see something that reminds me of someone or a story or an occurrence that we were together and did battle with or, worked on together. And I not only will sometimes just stop and pray for that person, but for me, it's better if I can actually just dial the number. And the beautiful thing about cell phones these days is you've got your contact list. It doesn't cost you like it used to cost you to make a phone call. I know many of you in the audience probably don't remember what it was like to put nickels and dimes and quarters in a payphone. But it's just something that each day I try to think about. What's going on around me and who could I benefit by talking to? And that's what I would conclude, your question in saying so often that conversation leads me to thinking about something that I've been thinking about differently or in an additive way. And I think, we talk a lot of times about being a learner or a grower rather than a knower. And, knowers, are usually pretty closed off as to how much higher they think that they can go because they think they've already reached it. And we really desire to surround ourselves by learners and growers, and that's generally what I've probably been attracted to along the way as well.
Thank you. I mean, that's a great just reminder of as the Spirit brings someone to mind, pray for them certainly, but a better next step is even just to call them or text them and just say, hey, no, you came to mind. I
can't tell you how many times, Drew, that I've made that call. And, first of all, we pick up right where we left off. It could have been, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 weeks ago, but we pick up right where we left off and carry on. But it just seems like more often than not, before that conversation ends, the person says, I'm so glad you called. And I feel the same. And I just feel like we both went away energized in a different way to take on what's next.
Well, you're here because you received the Honorary Alum of the Year award. It's a mouthful, but it was well deserved, and certainly that was because of your investment in people, but also board service. 15 years on the board, and there's always kind of this mystery behind board of trustees. What is that? And you mentioned getting so much out of it, so. Maybe just give a little bit of overview of, what is the board? What was your particular involvement with the board? And then I'll ask a little bit about what you learned in the process.
Yeah, well, I'm guessing a lot of the listeners have heard the term board before, and boards by and large are, I think, the same. No matter whether they're overseeing a church or overseeing a large corporation, they have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the business is conducted in accordance with whatever the articles are, articles of incorporation or the bylaws, and they also have a big responsibility to make sure that the leader of that organization is performing in the manner that the organization is well represented. So today, the Grace Board I think is still a composition of 30 folks, and the various people that comprise the board today. Really varies in an immense way. I mean, from clergy to business people to lay people, community citizens, Grace alums, many of them. But it's really a melting pot in a lot of ways of a very diverse group in its makeup. And, we certainly, twice a year formally come together and do board business. But throughout the year, there's also a set of responsibilities that we carry out to, continue to represent the college every chance that we get. Also, assist you with the dubious task of fundraising. And
we need to talk about that, Bob.
So let's be honest.
Yeah.
Especially folks that know what Grace stands for. There's a great opportunity to continue to support the mission of Grace. But I'm maybe missing the last part of your question.
No, that's exactly. Yeah. I think it's just helpful for people to even know kind of what is the board and what do they do. Yeah. What did you say was kind of some of your particular involvement? And I would say maybe I'll add to that highlights too. Yeah. I mean, if you think back over those 15 years, are there a few moments that come to mind that were highlights for you?
Yeah, so being the finance guy, I didn't get to participate on too many other commissions other than the business commission, which again makes a lot of sense. The business commission it seemed like to often be the one that was responsible for a lot of the highest number of motions and reviewing financials and seeing the condition of the organization. So we had I think a pretty dubious task to always be on point and doing business. The learning for me is, so often I think when I joined the board, I heard the phrase that God will provide, and being the finance person that I am and seeing the financial picture that we sometimes are trying to think our way through. That's a monumental task sometimes that God will provide, and trying to decide, do we or don't we do something that has some financial requirement associated with it. And so, my responsibility was to offer my wisdom and my insight into that from time to time. But I learned an immense amount, that God does provide, but God also expects us to be responsible, and so I think sometimes boards can maybe get misguided, particularly a board or an organization that really is faith driven, and people may just lean on the side of saying, God will take care of that. Well, absolutely, God will see that it's taken care of, but as stewards, we need to be good stewards, and so I learned a lot about stewardship over the 15 years. But I would say there are a lot of things that we did that really changed the trajectory of Grace, and I would say there have been things that we did that probably even help Grace survive, if I could be so bold and say that. Secondary education continues to be challenged in so many ways, and add another dimension of private, Christian secondary education, and you find yet another set of hurdles to overcome. And so, trying to be creative, trying to think about how we can provide the education that we do at a rate that families can afford. That was always something that I think that was near and dear to our hearts. And so the one thing that sticks out in my mind probably most prevalently is when we shortened the duration in which you could obtain a degree. A 4-year degree became a possibility in 3, and a master's degree became 5 became possible in 4, and that changed the. It really changed the financial situation for the families associated with that, but it also changed inside the Grace organization as well. And I would look back and very open-handedly tell you that I don't know that we had it all right. As a matter of fact, should it have been exactly the way it was priced? Maybe we could go back and question it. But what I do know is the intent of that was to lessen the burden. And the board at the time was seeing, all kinds of tuition debt being rung up by students all across the country or around the world, for that matter. And we didn't feel good about that. we didn't want a family or a student to be burdened with a boat anchor of debt that was going to be around them for many years after graduation. And I wouldn't say we alleviated it in its entirety, but I do think that was a real game-changing endeavor. And credit where credit's due. I think the board had a lot of input into that, but Dr. Cadup was really very instrumental in that, and he had to convince a faculty to change their curriculum. And so I don't want to take anything away from the fact that the faculty had to be involved and the administration had to be involved. It took an all hands on deck to achieve that.
That was right before I came to Grace, and it is one of those kind of stories that lives in lore of the ability of Dr. Cadup as also a very relational guy like you, and Dr. Manahan being engaged as level-headed and as he is and wise, and the board and faculty and just that kind of it's innovation, right? But innovation is only as good as execution. And so the ability to pull that off, and when I came, it was always the question of how are they doing that? And I don't know why, just amazed to see the board and the faculty and the administration and all come together and put that together in an innovative way to help students.
Well, I don't know if it's appropriate. I'll go there and you can edit it out if you think it's inappropriate, but I will always remember that we got the opportunity. Dr. Cadup and I traveled down to Purdue to sit down with Mitch Daniels at the time that Mitch was coming into the Purdue organization, and I think it captured his imagination that wow, Grace has done this, and so he wanted to understand how we had achieved what we had achieved. And for those of you that are big Mitch Daniel fans like me, I thought that said a lot, that we would get the opportunity to sit down with the Mitch Daniels, former Governor Mitch Daniels, and let him hear the things that we had taken on.
Well, to share my own memory, it wasn't that long ago, maybe a year, 18 months ago or so, where we were beginning some new innovative thinking around some partnerships with Purdue, and Dr. Cadup and I got on the phone with Mitch Daniels, and he remembered that interaction, and that was the reason he was willing to talk to Grace again, is because he knew of Grace as a place that was firm in its faith and commitments, yet willing and able to pull off innovative endeavors. So lots of great memories and doors open. So thank you for sharing that. What do you feel as you've looked back on your board time? What do you feel makes Grace unique from the seat that you sat in as not a formal alum, but as a board member who is engaged because of the community and the people?
Yeah, well, I've mentioned Manchester before, and Manchester still has a very special place in my heart. But I would tell you, I've not been everywhere, but there's never ever been a time that I've been on Grace's campus that I just didn't feel the Holy Spirit at work. And whether that's through the faculty, whether that's through a student encounter, whether that's a board meeting, I just always feel like God is there, and God is with us. And I think I'm reminded as well, Drew, that some of my first impressions of being on Grace's campus, the manner in which the students just go about their daily walk. And again, I know that not everybody comes in the same way that they leave, but that's the beauty of Grace. And I think that, one of my favorite things, although I've not attended, hundreds of them, but chapel is just a memory that will long permeate, my thinking as it relates to Grace. And to see, the choir, or the band going, and to see the students, singing and praising the Lord the way that they do, inspirational speakers that come in and really teach messages. But that happens every day in the classroom at Grace College. And again, I'm reluctant to call out a particular professor, but I'd probably be remiss if I didn't, because he's been so instrumental in helping me find, really great students to hire, and that's Prof. Stichter, Dr. Stichter. I've watched him. I've marveled at the way that every class starts with a prayer. Every class is got some biblical aspect to it, and he is constantly teaching with the Bible in mind, and bringing to life the Bible through the way in which these students are going to go out and live their lives. And presumably also work in the businesses and the organizations they become a part of. And I know that, again, Dr. Stichter's not the only one that does that. I know that permeates this campus. And to me, that's a real differentiating factor.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, Bob. That was really well said. I love that line of, we all come different than we leave, and isn't that what grace is?
Absolutely.
Amen to that. Congratulations on being alum of the year, and I'm also just so thankful that you're continuing to stay engaged as even a post-board member life, and we are thankful for that as well, and thanks for spending some time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's it's a real pleasure. I talk about stopping at that four-way stop. When I first got here. Now I can't wait to get through it and to drive around campus. The campus, by the way, is beautiful. I mean, the things that have gone on, in the 15 or plus years that I've been associated with Grace, and now the new cafeteria. I mean, dining hall. I forget what the actual formal terminology is, but it's really exciting to see the things that have happened over the last many years. And I trust and pray that God has a big dream as to what's going to continue to happen here.
Amen. Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you for Dr. Wally Brath providing our music today, and also to Ryan and Rick for being our producers. If you could like or share this wherever you retrieved it from, we would be so appreciative. Until next time, live your best grace story today.